Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ. With me is Jeff. Today we're talking about the 1980 horror classic, The Changeling.
Okay, BJ, what did you think of The Changeling?
So I had only really seen The Changeling once before. I believe I watched it with you. I forget if it was at your house or a different friend's house, but I had watched it in the group. So The Changeling is a very different experience when you're watching it by yourself. It is co- compared to a lot of other movies we've watched in this podcast. The Changeling is not lighthearted or happy at all. It is quite the heavy movie.
It is a heavy movie. It's yeah, and when I watched it in the dark by myself late at night with the only light in the room is the light from the screen. And yep, that was my viewing experience.
So mine was much the same, except I think I had my light at my computer desk on because I watch all my movies on my computer.
Mhm.
Because really the only place where I have a chair I can lean back on.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of furniture. Anyway, so, so the Changeling is. I like the Changeling. There's some things I have to say about which I guess it's general enough to say that for a good 90% of the movie I really really like it, but I feel like the ending was a bit rushed. But then again, I also feel like that's usually the weak point in horror movies is the ending.
Really? I haven't really watched very many horror movies because I generally don't like them. But this one this one's good. It's definitely a good horror movie. I think that newer scary movies do a good job of trying to lead the audience in and then give them a scare moment, but just to do it at the very, very precise moment when the audience is ready to be startled. That's the real trick to these kinds of movies. And this movie did a great job of it, and I feel like newer horror movies probably learned something important from this. Uh, because just the way that the characters are drawn into what's happening around them, it's a very slow, gradual building up that happens in every scene and every group of scenes. And that's what I think I like about this movie the most is just how the sequences lead you into something.
Yeah, seems like a lot of horror movies are built around the jump scare. There's the guy walks in the closet and the cat jumps out, and there's the music sting and the loud noise, right? And that happens pretty often. There's like maybe what, like three, four jump scares in this movie, and all of them are earned.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the trick. The jump scare is all about what happens before the jump scare, not the jump scare itself. It's everything leading up to it. This movie knows how to do that right. That's yeah, I definitely would give it a pass and an A plus for leading it on like that. But I have seen newer horror movies that, and obviously I don't see a lot of them, but the ones I've seen probably are a little bit more gripping than this one. This one's 1980, so I don't know if there's any really great movies before this that were like this that I know of, where it draws you in so well and gives you that jump scare right at the precise moment.
It's definitely a good one. I should also say I'm not a big connoisseur of horror. I have my scary movies that I like, but I'm not I'm not a big fan of gore. I'm not a big fan of like indiscriminate violence, so that eliminates a lot of the modern horror movies for me.
Yeah, I'm
Stuff.
kind of the same way. Like I'm not into seeing real dramatic, terrible violence. I prefer my violence to be, simple violence, like a stormtrooper getting blown up or something like that. I think in a lot of movies, the violence is meant to not be the main draw of the film. But in horror movies, they make all the dark and scary things even darker and scarier just to affect the audience. So
I mean, it obviously depends on the type of movie. I mean, if you go to like a Friday the 13th or any kind of slasher movie, the I guess the draw of those is the quote unquote kill scenes, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a fan
yeah,
of those, so I can't really say with any certainty what
those are
the
like slasher movies.
audience is. Yeah, yeah, slasher movies.
Yeah. Whereas this is a little different. This is not a slasher movie. This
No.
is purely a mystery, scary movie. There's a
There's
lot of yeah.
would you call it more of a I don't even would call it psychological horror because there's definitely supernatural stuff going on.
It's a bit of a psychological horror. There is some element to it. Um, yeah, I would call it kind of a psychological horror to some extent, but it's mostly just a very classic horror movie of with a lot of mystery involved with it that builds up over time to a conclusion. Yeah. So, in the month of October, would you recommend that people watch this The Changeling?
I would definitely say watch Changing at least once. Like I said, it's not a happy it's not a lighthearted movie. It's not the type of movie you're going to be like, "Oh, well, that was fun." It's going to be the kind of movie that you're like, I mean,
It's not like
my
after watching a Hallmark movie and feeling all warm and fuzzy inside and
no, no, it's not a movie that leaves with the warm fuzzies. My initial plan was to watch it yesterday and then maybe watch it again this morning to refresh myself before we recorded. But after watching it last night, I'm like, no, I like this movie, but I don't need to watch it twice in 24 hours and just inflict that upon myself. Once a year is good for the Changeling, I think.
yeah. Well, and I don't get scared by movies as much as I used to. When I was a kid, like scary movies were scary. And I know everybody tried to act tough, and I certainly did my best, but the reality is a scary movie is going to have me crawling under my seat at some point. And at least when I was younger, but today I have to really invest myself to try and get into a scary movie. So when I watched The Changeling in my dark room with my the flicker of the screen only, I really tried. I tried to put myself in place of the characters and really be like, what would I do in this situation? I tried to, and that's where horror movies I think are best when you watch them is when you really invest yourself and try to feel something like what these characters would feel. Um, so I tried to do that, and I have to admit this was a little bit scary for me, even though I don't have the innocentness that I used to have. I mean, I know it's just a movie, and I know some of the tropes that they're doing are cliche and everything, but still, if you really try, you can get a little bit intrigued and a little bit you could feel some of that fear from this movie. I think it does well, especially if you invest yourself.
Yeah, this movie does an absolutely marvelous job of building tension, which is kind of why I think I'm a little disappointed in the ending, but we can get more into that when we
Yeah,
start
definitely.
talking about spoilers.
Yeah, I definitely want to discuss the ending. All right. So I recommend it. You recommend it. It's
It's
not like
great.
a yeah, it's great. Absolutely
It's
great.
it's not gory. There is scenes of violence, especially scenes of scene in particular of violence against children. So it
Yeah,
is it is it is listed on IMDb as rated R. So viewer discretion is advised. This is not the kind of movie you want to watch with your younger kids.
definitely not. In fact, anybody who uh, is a lighthearted person in any way probably shouldn't watch it at all. Like my wife asked, like, do you want to watch it? Should we watch it together? And I was like, no, no, you can't watch this. I said
Well,
no.
hasn't your wife seen The Changeling before? I could
I
have
think
sworn she
she
was there when
has,
we
but the
watched it
reality
last.
is I said no because she she internalizes things too much, way too much. She reads like Les Mis and then she just cries and cries for days. She's like that. So I don't,
Does-
she gets very emotionally involved in everything she absorbs. So yeah, that's an example of just yeah. If things disturb you too much, then skip it. Go watch something fun and lighthearted, and that's fine. But I honestly think one of the great things about horror movies is that feeling a little bit of fear or feeling uncomfortable can kind of be a little bit nice because even though it feels terrible, I think going through that experience in a movie can be valuable. I don't know that it's like how do I describe it? It's it's like when we have dreams. This is where I get all philosophical silliness that in and everything. But like we have dreams, we have nightmares sometimes. Our dreams aren't always nice and cheery. I think our minds want to at least go through something that's uncomfortable, at least so that we can experience some simulation of it. Does that make sense? So I think horror movies kind of fit into that category where it can be helpful to go through uncomfortable emotions.
yeah, I think it was you who said before that part of the reason why people watch movies and stuff like horror movies in particular is that it lets them feel an emotion they usually don't feel in their day-to-day life.
Yep. Yep. And I think a lot of entertainment is really about that. It's like you go and see a play, you go to a movie theater, you're getting involved in a storyline. It's all about getting a little sample of something that you wouldn't normally get. And even and not even animals like dogs and cats when they're little and even when they're bigger, they'll play. They'll play with something. It's not a real mouse, but they see a string and they want to play with it. I think there's something to that where we just want to have a little sample, a little exercise of something. And that's what entertainment, I think, is all about. And horror movies can be part of that because I think getting a little scared probably has some positive things to it. There's probably a reason why we're so drawn to it, where we want to be a little bit frightened and a little bit surprised by something.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah.
if if you're looking for something that's I wouldn't say it's definitely higher up on the horror scale than Mr. Boogedy was. So if
Yeah,
you're
Mr. Boogedy and this movie are very much opposites.
so though, well, I'll get to that when we
Yeah,
get into
yeah, yeah.
spoiler territory.
Okay.
Do you want to get into spoiler territory?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so
So
from
from
here on
now
out,
on.
okay, so yeah, here now we're talking spoilers. So I know when we talked about Mr. Boogedy, we kind of jokingly talked about how it had a lot of the classic horror movie tropes. There was
Yeah,
there's there's at least a few things that the Changeling and Mr. Boogedy have in common.
certainly so.
It's like for one thing, if someone from the historical society tells you to get out of the house, just get out of the house.
Is that why we watched these two movies? Did you
I
actually think that
no,
these
I
two were
did.
somewhat linked to each other?
It has actually been so long because they've seen the Changeling. The only thing I really remembered about it was wheelchair cam
Yeah, how could you forget the wheelchair cam?
because
That's like the when you said every time you talk about this movie or mention it in my brain, I'm like, oh yeah, the movie with the wheelchair cam. That is
it's.
like the prime thing that is easy to remember.
I suppose
And
we should just talk about it now since we're talking about it. But yeah, that wheelchair cam is kind of the embodiment of my problem with the ending.
yeah,
It's like it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and then all of a sudden, what's the what's the character's name? Elaine, something like that.
yeah, the girl from
Uh,
the historical
Claire,
society,
Claire. Her name is
Claire.
Claire.
Claire, all right.
Yeah, just there's so much buildup, and then we just had this big tense meeting uh between John Russell and the senator, and then Claire goes to the house by herself and ends up being chased by the wheelchair, and they put the camera in the wheelchair and chase her down the hall with it, and it's like, what?
I remember we once watched this. This might be the time that you were reflecting on earlier, but I know with a group of friends, we were watching this probably 20 plus years ago. And
I don't think it was that long ago, but it's probably been at least a decade.
yeah, so we were watching it and it was this nice movie. People were getting into it, and the moment the wheelchair cam came on, everyone just burst out laughing.
Which
'Cause
is not the emotion it was going for.
no, no, and in the 1980s, there were probably lots of people that were scared by that, and people could get scared by it today. It's a little bit. It's just a little bit cheesy from
It
today's
was,
standards.
well, like, even as far as the rest of the movie goes, it was I can't really think how to phrase it. It was a lot more, um, I don't know. I get what they were going for, but the whole being chased by the wheelchair in the first place just didn't really feel didn't really fit the feel of the rest of the movie. I feel like.
Well, I think that part of the real brilliance of this movie is the camera work, because there's this trick where you have a person in a room and their back is to the camera, and what you do is you have the camera follow closely behind them, and it comes through a doorway and turns around. And what's creepy about that is the exact angle that a human being would see as they walk into a room and turn and look at them. And I feel like that is done a lot just to make the audience feel like, okay, this person is alone in a house and the camera is doing this. It's almost as if like they're not alone, that there's someone else there. And it's supposed to add to that creepy vibe inside the movie. And the wheelchair cam might have been an attempt like that. They might have been thinking, this is me supposing what they were actually thinking, which we don't know, but that somehow it's that forced perspective of, if you give it from an angle from the ghost's perspective, you can get that feeling like there's somebody chasing her. It's not just a chair. There's a presence chasing her. And I don't know. It just, perhaps in the end, it just didn't work out as well because the wheelchair cam, I don't know.
Yeah, I can see where you're getting at with that, but yeah, I just feel like wheelchair cam didn't. If
Yeah.
that was what they were going for, they could have done something better, I feel. But
Yeah, I honestly, this is me and my, I've never been to film school, but I would have thought that if you put the camera behind the wheelchair, then that might have worked better than in the wheelchair. Um, but who knows? Who knows?
yeah,
Something. I think it's kind of like, it was supposed to be kind of like a Jurassic Park moment. In Jurassic Park, they have a lot of camera shots where the audience gets the sense that something is about to get them and it's approaching them from behind, and they have a perspective. They have the raptor running for the people, and there's that feeling of it. You gotta go, you gotta run, it's gonna get you in any moment. I think the wheelchair cam needed to be something like that, where it looked like it was gonna overtake her and the audience would suddenly be very tense in their seat as they saw it. But yeah, it would have been like the one of the highlights, like the highest point of the movie, but it just didn't work out. But the good thing about this is everything else in this movie really did work with the camera angles and with a lot of the sequences and everything. Everything else
yeah,
was really well done.
yeah. I'm not a what's I don't even
What's the
know
word? A
what.
ghostologist?
No, 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 no,
Paranormal
not
investigator?
no, no. I was thinking more of the long lines of like, being an expert in like film techniques or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, like even I was like, there's a lot of good camera work in this movie. There's a lot of good long tracking shots where they just kind
Yeah,
of, like you said, they follow characters from room to room. There's not a lot of just scenes where there's a lot of cuts, and when they do it, they do it in a way that they do it in a way that's meant to build tension, whether that rather than the just as kind of lazy editing technique.
yeah. You definitely. They really have. They really planned this whole thing out really well, and I love how they just kind of like move the camera into a room, slightly turn it so it's a little askew, and then they back it out again. It gives this kind of feeling of like something's not right here. Um, it's not a normal camera movement that would be in a movie. It's an unusual one that's designed to make the audience feel like there's something in this room that's making us not want to go there. And they do a lot of camera movements where they follow almost like the perspective from the presence in the house, where they just go through room to room and they open doors and they move in behind people. And even when they come up to the house and they see the house, it's a lot like Mr. Boogedy, where they approach this house and it's obviously from the late 1800s and it looks creepy. But I love in Mr. Boogedy, talking about that, how they just kind of make fun of that whole stereotype of a spooky house. And whereas in The Changeling, they try to do it seriously.
Yeah, it is. Is a little outlandish that this one guy is running out like this big mansion just for himself.
Yeah, it's such a huge house. And honestly, haunted or not, I'd love to live in a house that big. That would be very comfortable. And, despite the fact that, that it's haunted, it is a nice looking house on the inside. The
Oh
bookcases are
yeah,
really
that
nice. It has like wallpaper, but then like a molding, crown molding around the wallpaper. The walls are really, really well done. It has great uh, like architecture everywhere. It has 3 floors.
oh yeah, it was a sweet deal, you know. The guy rents the place from the historical society. The historical society like like the historical society like pays for the groundskeeper and the handyman. It's like, what's the downside? Other than the fact that it's super haunted.
Other than the fact it's super haunted.
Super haunted.
Well, apparently this story is based upon the writer for. I hopefully I get this right. The writer for this movie apparently claimed that he had somewhat of an experience that um in, that was where he moved into a big old house and he felt it was haunted, and there were some experiences he recorded and claims happened, and later on he put it all into a screenplay and probably made good money from the creation of this movie. Uh,
Yeah, I read a little bit about that. So yeah, the original story was by Russell Hunter, who's the guy who claimed that he experienced a lot of the stuff like what happens in the movie at a old location, I think
in Colorado?
Colorado. Yeah,
Yeah.
and and then the screenplay was, and then the original story was adapted to screenplay by, according to IMDb, William Gray and Diana Maddox.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I
So I don't know how much truth there is to that story. I mean, you can't really, there's limits on how much you can truly really confirm. And the internet is full of stories that are there just to kind of like get you going. So it's hard to really know what to
yeah.
trust and what not to trust.
So while we're on this subject, I actually wrote down in my notes to ask you this. So
Okay.
I know this is I know this is an opinion that various and the sword people have various and the sword opinions on, but how, what is your level of belief in things like, in this particular situation, ghosts?
Well, that's a heavy question. uh, my belief is that I'm a doubter of most things. Um, I doubt quite a bit, especially because I think people often make mistakes, and I think we're theatrically inclined, so we tend to gravitate towards the most interesting stories to us. So things can get out of hand through generations and a lot of things. But at the same time, I I don't discount people. Like if someone came up to me and said they saw something and they can't explain it and they felt it was something paranormal, I certainly wouldn't be rude and say like, no, it's nothing. I would probably hear them out and say, that's what happened, and I, I would definitely respect what they talked about. I've had people actually tell me things before, and they told me experiences they've had, and I don't know. I tend to be very agnostic about it. I actually had a kind of a spooky event when I was a kid too, and I still don't know what happened. It was, I don't know if this podcast is the right place for it, but yeah, I had a very spooky thing happen. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so
I
obviously
will.
I'm just tangenting and not answering your
Yeah.
question.
Well, you're more or less you're more or less answering it. You're a skeptic, and you, outside of maybe one experience, you haven't really had anything to base your own opinion off of. So as such, you're more of a skeptic.
I am more of a skeptic, but at the same time, I don't believe in discounting people um, just based upon how ridiculous the story might be. But at the same time, being neutral means that you don't necessarily jump in and believe a story just because it's outlandish either. You really need to just be careful about what you invest, what you think is actually correct and true. So, um, yeah, with that, like with this original story, when I heard it about the author of this movie, he said that when he moved into a house, there was shaking, there was desks and walls were shaking. There was even one point where a window cracked and glass came and hit him in the face. And he also claims that there was a seance where they were able to get information that was helpful, and somehow in the course of everything they figured out that there was someone buried under a well, that was that a new house had been built over. They went in, they excavated, they dug up the floor in that house, and they found a well, and they actually found a person, and they turned those remains into the police. That's the story I got from the internet. And so I don't know if any of that is really true. In fact, I did also read that the house that he stayed in apparently wasn't old enough to really fit in with the story. But all the accounts that I heard or I read about all said that there was actually a cemetery in Colorado, and somebody who was really eager for land decided to build over the cemetery. Seems like a terrible idea. So I don't know. I don't really believe any of it unless I get more confirmation that any of this stuff is actually correct. But I don't know. You have to be careful. You can find multiple accounts of people saying, "Well, this happened and this happened," but really, it takes a lot of really good professional investigation to really figure out what the facts from um, all of the intriguing ideas that have been passed on.
Yeah, and like I said, I've had my own experiences. I've only have one I put any stock in because it turns out people who are, I'm not going to share the story because it does. Reason why I put any stock in this one is because people who are in the same place I was had experienced similar things. I don't want to throw their identities out there because I don't know if they still feel the same way or are comfortable talking about it. But
That's fine. You don't share anything you don't want to.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I was thinking about this earlier because I knew I was going to ask you this question, so I
Okay.
knew it was going to come back on me. So I don't know if I'm a skeptical believer or a believing skeptic, but based on my own experiences, I am obligated to believe there is something, but I am not obligated to believe that anything weird that happens is paranormal, you know?
Hmm. Interesting answer.
Because like I said, the one experience I put any stock in is the kind of thing I would just, oh, that's just my imagination running wild with me, except that I brought up idly with someone else I was sharing the building with at the time, and they're like, huh, someone else told me about the exact same thing like a few days ago, and I'd experienced that myself, so it wasn't even just talking about it. I just kind of brought it up in passing. They're like, oh yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, me and this one other person have experienced the same thing. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I can tell you about mine. I don't mind. Mine
Well,
is
I mean, it's
not
like I said,
interesting
so,
really.
oh,
Go ahead.
like I said, it's totally up to you because, like I said, I don't feel comfortable sharing mine because sharing mine would draw people who are not part of this podcast into it. So, like I said, I don't want to,
Okay.
on the off chance someone who knows who I'm talking about, like, goes to people, it's BJ sound, this podcast that you were haunted, like I said, I don't know if they still feel the same way after reflection or if they're comfortable talking about, so
Hmm. Well,
if you want to, go ahead.
yeah. So mine is not entertaining. It's not interesting or entertaining really. I'll just destroy it that way as I start to tell it. But is when, let's see, how old was I? And to be fair, I was a kid with a wild imagination, and things spooked me all the time. Yet, in the end, it was always something silly. Like, I remember being totally creeped out that there was someone sitting at the foot of my bed when I was a kid. And finally, I had the gumption to turn my light on, and it was all the laundry I didn't put away. It was draped over my chair. So I had a wild imagination that really afflicted a lot of fear on me at certain times. But probably there was one day where I was about somewhere between 7 to 10, some age range in there,
So,
um, something
so
like
I
that.
knew you during this time period.
Yes, you did. I don't think I ever told you this, but I walked into my room, not at night, it was the daytime, and I walked in, and my room was a terrible mess as it always was, and so that's part of it. My room was a mess, but then I laid down on my bed and just laid there for a moment, and I felt something in between my shoulder blades. The weird thing is that, okay, there could have been stuff in my bed, like toys or just objects that were under my covers. Yeah, that's understandable. The weird thing about this is that when I laid down, it wasn't there. And then after I laid there for a few moments, suddenly there was something that like pushed against the middle of my back between my shoulder blades and like pushed upwards. So I was actually pushed about 2 inches higher. And when it happened, I just froze. Like I didn't move. It was such an incredible shock to me that I just didn't move at all. It felt like a hand, like the fingers of a hand, but I don't know exactly what it was. And so I then stayed there frozen, unable to move. I was so terrified. And then I just, not knowing what else to do, I just like darted straight out of the room. And then I told my parents about it, and of course, they basically were like the parents from Mr. Boogedy. Exactly like that. Oh, come now. That's that's silly. I'm sure it's fine. Nothing happened. It yeah, very cliche. And so I didn't even go into my room for 3 days following that. Like I wouldn't even enter it. It was during summer vacation, I believe, so I didn't have school. So just to appease me, my parents actually made a cot in the living room. They got one of the camping cots out, and they put some blankets on it, and I slept on that for 3 days without ever going back in my room. And then after 3 days, I decided, all right, well, all my stuff's in there. What can I do? So I went back in, and it was fine. That was it. And so that was the strange thing that happened to me. And I've reflected on it since then, because here's the thing, like, my room was a mess. There were lots of things in there. I don't understand how anything could have been like jostled or moved around. And I do have other siblings that could have played a trick on me. So there's that. But they didn't, they never, I mean, I don't know how they could have managed it. And they were all very oblivious to it. Which is not really their normal thing to do. If they had tricked me, they would have at some point taken credit for that. They would have wanted the glory of
Yeah,
having
you're,
freaked me out and made me stay
yeah,
outside my room for days.
yeah, your brother would have let you know about.
Oh yeah, that would have been a real triumph. And so, but he wasn't at all. I don't remember him really saying anything about it. He didn't. Yeah, they were all just as. Well, actually, I don't remember much. To be honest, it's been a long time ago. But
Yeah,
so I had this
uh,
one little thing that happened, but beyond that, nothing really.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of people have, that one weird little thing that happened to them, but they can't really chalk up the anything paranormal if it was just, that was weird.
Yeah,
It only
and
happened once.
I don't really claim to be that it was paranormal. In fact, I'm not really convinced necessarily that it was. I have no idea. It's an anomaly. Just something. So yeah, it certainly freaked me out though. The one thing that is certain that I was very scared by it.
I mean, yeah, you're sitting here talking about it at the risk of dating ourselves, tw- to be to be generous and inaccurate, some 20 years later.
A long time. It was a long time ago. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
Anyway,
talking
so
about the changeling.
kind of a roundabout segue back into things. So on the subject of belief in the paranormal, has sort of a way to circle back. Did you ever watch shows like Ghost Hunters or any of those weird paranormal investigation shows that were popular in like the mid 2000s?
No. And I'm all very skeptical of those shows, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
My fa-
I think if
yeah.
there was a ghost, it wouldn't it wouldn't show up during a reality show. I don't think it would show
Uh,
up on cue in a reality show.
yeah, it was me, my sister, and my mom were me and my sister were living at home at the time. Me and my sister and my mom would watch Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, and I really liked the first few seasons because during the first few seasons they had like maybe a total of like 3 hauntings that they're like, yeah, that could be a ghost. Like they would go episodes and episodes and episodes where they're like, yeah, we didn't find the evidence, or no, here's what was causing that. So like in the later seasons, because the show got popular, so they had the jazz things up there, like finding hauntings left, right, and center.
Hmm.
But I just kind of circle around back to that because, hey, there's paranormal investigators in the Changelings. Here we are, back on subject.
Yeah, and he goes and finds a scientist, and the scientist is like, "Oh yes, all of these things are very normal." And I don't think there is a real scientist anywhere that would really be like that.
Well,
I don't think you could even find somebody who would answer that question that way.
I, I've always wondered because in like this and in like Ghostbusters, there's like these major universities with like a parapsychology department for some reason, right?
Yeah,
Is there actually a major university that has a? I mean, maybe back in the '80s, who knows? Like nowadays, is there a?
I've never heard of one.
like
And
a licensed college or whatever with like a parapsychology department.
I don't know. I've seen I have I don't know. I know a bit about psychology departments. And I don't think there's ever been anything like that. Not really. But I could be wrong. There are many universities. There might be one out there that sometimes universities like niche things. They like doing something very unique in their programs. So I don't know.
Yeah,
But I don't really see in real life a real scientist, somebody like that really doing it. I see plenty of authors who would love to do it and love to answer questions like that and would say, oh yeah, this stuff is normal. There's definitely plenty of people who like this stuff and pursue it, but to have real professionals at a university or scientists that are in a legitimate program, I don't think there's anyone like that. That kind of stuff only exists in the movie world.
well, like even in the movie, the guy at the college he was talking to was like, "Yeah, we test a lot of psychics and mediums, and like 99% of them are frauds." And
Yeah.
and that's how he gets in touch with the one medium that comes to his house. Is that
Yeah,
she's the go ahead.
yeah, and he doesn't confirm it. He doesn't say, he's careful with his words. Just says intriguing. 1% of them, very intriguing. So he's still covering himself as a scientist. So in the story, I think he says that probably because he doesn't want his other scientist friends to really know that he somewhat believes in this paranormal stuff. Speaking according to the story, of course.
Uh, well, little did you know that 6 years later, some college professors at a university in New York are going to start a franchise. You heard it here first. Changeling and Ghostbusters happens in the same universe. Not
Yeah.
really. Please don't
Yeah.
sue me.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, so we're tangentially back at.
Let's go back to the movie. We're talking about the Changeling.
I've attempted the tangent back into the movie, so here we go.
Okay. So what I really like about this movie is one of the things I love about movies the most is when they have a mystery in which they have to work hard to get clues to solve the mystery. They have to, and in the story, information comes a bit at a time. So you're learning about and discovering things at the same pace as the characters, and that is in this movie, and I really like that. The George C. Scott character, whose name is Russell, I think.
John Russell, yeah.
Ron Russell. Russell's his last name. So he, he's such a well played character.
Yeah. One of the things I think makes this movie work is that the main character, he's a likable guy.
Yeah.
They show he's likable. Like at the very beginning of the movie, like the first thing I wrote in my notes is, by the way, The Changeling is not a fun, lighthearted movie because basically the first thing that happens is that he witnesses his wife and daughter get ran over by a truck.
Yeah.
And then the story takes place, I think they says like about half a year later. He's gone through his mourning process and he's trying to get back on.
Yes,
trying
but he
to
did
get back
move.
into life.
He's trying to get back into life, but he left his old life behind. So they were somewhere else in the country, I think in New England or something like that.
Yeah.
And they moved to Washington. So it's like he wants to start again, but he's running away at the same time. He's still incredibly filled with grief.
Even though know if it's
Go ahead.
I don't know if I would really call it running away. I mean, he brings up the fact that just one day he found himself just wandering around his apartment muttering, they're gone. And then I think I don't feel like, how to phrase it. I don't think I would call it running away by moving out of that situation and going someplace else to kind of pick up the pieces. I think that's just part of his process. And I think that's what makes this movie work, because I feel like in a lot of other movies, they would have the guy just witnessed his who just witnessed his family die as sort of a broken, jaded character that nobody likes. But in this case, it's not a guy who is like being haunted by his own demons per se. It's a guy who is trying to heal after a major trauma, but this
Yeah.
major trauma kind of links him into the current mystery.
I think that's a change in writing that's been going on for the last 50 to 100 years. Is that 50 to 100 years ago, the characters were much stronger. They were more resilient. They felt grief, they felt sorrow, they felt loss, but there was a little bit more of of a survival like aspect to them. They were still pulling themselves together somehow. Whereas today, people like to write people that just have fallen apart, or things go bad, they yell and scream, and it's just like there's not a lot of like fortitude. I think older movies seem to have characters with more fortitude
Well,
than newer ones.
and and again, this is a gross blanket statement, so
It is a
take it as
gross
it is.
blanket statement. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe it's wrong. And
but yeah,
there's a whole lot of characters that are being written about in many ways, and there might be some good to the fact that you see people being vulnerable on screen
well,
too. So I'm not completely against it, but
no, yeah, no, I totally get that, but it always seems like there's not a lot of plying the middle ground. It's like either the epitome of the character is that they're super emotional, or that they are super not emotional. They show no emotions. They're not allowed to feel emotions because they're a manly man or a strong woman character or whatever, right?
yeah, I don't feel like you get that from this character. From what was his first name? Let's see,
John Russell.
John Russell. Yeah, from the character John, he's he's obviously incredibly grieved by what happened, but he's also a very like professional guy. He's very well disciplined. He understands what happened, and we see him like months and months after the tragedy.
Yeah,
So even though he wakes up crying in the morning because he's still filled with grief, he's still trying to, he still gets out of bed and goes and tackles the day, even though
yeah, he's
his grief has got to be so heavy.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's trying to move on. He's trying to write music again. He's taking him a new teaching job. He's kind of getting into he's making friends. He's kind of starting a new relationship with the girl from the historical society. So he's trying to heal and move on. He's not, his
Yeah.
grief is a part of him, but he's not defined by his grief.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And then he comes to this house, and you know, the things that are happening in the house are very strange. But he doesn't just run away from the house. I think if I was in his place and I started seeing all these things, I'd be like, all right, my stuff's packed. Goodbye.
I don't know.
I'm gone.
Isn't that kind of opposite of what you said when we talked about Mr. Boogedy? Like a house, like a house.
That's true, I guess. I've been contradicting myself a lot.
Yeah. I guess you're. Oh, then.
Okay,
again,
so it is Mr. Boogedy.
Then again, it does have the most terrifying noise that any homeowner can hear: the sound of water running somewhere.
Oh my goodness, that's true.
Because like I said,
Oh no, water damage.
I have not owned my own home, but I have helped my parents repair some water damage at one point or another, and it is zero amounts of fun.
That is so true. Goodness, that house, it's so big. It's probably really expensive to heat it. It has that giant furnace that is that looks very old.
It's like the furnace from Home Alone that the kid's scared of.
Yeah. It's that really old-fashioned furnace from the 1950s that looked like jaws that would open and close. Yeah. Yeah, so that would be an expensive house to live in, just to pay all the utilities. But I don't know if you were in that house, BJ. This is a hypothetical question. If you were in that house, you got this great deal from the historic society of the town. Would you stay in the house after all those things, all the banging and the other things that happened?
I mean, it was just me. I don't know if I would like move in a house that big just by myself in the first place,
It would be too much even from the start.
because he kind of talks about it. He kind of talks about it himself in the movie. He's like, well, it's like, how much effort does it take to maintain a house like this? But then again, they also mentioned that the historical society like pays for the maintenance of the property in the house in the form of the groundskeeper that just kind of vanishes at some point.
Yeah,
Mr. Tully, I think his name was, something like that.
something like that. I mean, it's he does pay a rent fee of some kind,
Yeah.
but we don't really know how
It,
much it is. They
yeah,
don't really go into it.
he does lease house from the historical society. I guess he does need some room because like students from his class will come and he,
He tutors
he
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
he tours them. There's like, don't know if you call, I don't know my orchestra term, so I don't know, like a little chamber orchestra, like him on the piano and four or five people playing. So I guess he needs some space for that, but
Yeah. And it does come with that really nice music room space.
though, though I will say, you know, another trope I've picked up from various horror movies is that I'm not gonna if I find a if I move into an old place and I find a door boarded up, I'm not gonna open that door.
I agree. Like he's drawn to this room. Oh, because of the window. Yeah.
Well, he's drawn to the room because the window breaks, but it's also where the pounding noise is coming from. I think he says like every morning at 6 a.m. there's a pounding noise from somewhere in the house. It lasts for about 30 seconds,
Hmm.
which is, I think I've asked you this before, but you haven't seen The Haunting?
No, I haven't seen The Haunting.
Yeah, there's a pounding noise in that one too. It's not the same, but I don't know. I guess just loud pounding noises from somewhere in the house is just a very intimidating thing because it's creepy in this movie and it's creepy in The Haunting.
Yeah, I have loud pounding noises from my house all the time.
Yes,
It's
but
usually people causing
I,
them
I,
because they're
I was gonna
upset
say,
about something.
don't think it's quite as creepy. It's not quite as creepy when you know that it's your kids causing the pounding noises.
Yeah. Mm. Okay. Yeah. So, and I like that in the storyline. There's something like comes out of the window, and so he then is led up to go to the source of it. I really like that little bit at a time. You don't give the audience everything. You give them these little clues that slowly move along the storyline.
Yeah, it does
Um,
do a good job of filling up the mystery as it goes.
yeah, so you don't have to worry about everything at once. Just give the audience like one little thing to think about. And then you can have a couple of scenes where they work on that one little thing. And that's like the glass that comes out from that window. And he has to figure this out. How did the glass like get pushed out from the inside? So he has a strange mystery that he has to follow, and it leads him to that room. And the room is builds more mystery because there's these things in it. There's a wheelchair. There's little children's miniature toys. There's the music box, and the music box leads to the next mystery. So
It yeah
it's really well written like that. Yeah.
the music box that just so happens to have the exact same melody that he thought he was composing.
Yeah.
So this will lead me to another little tangent because I was thinking about this while I was watching the movie. You always, in movies like this, they always talk about the Hall of Records or they go to the library where they will go look at microfilm of old newspapers. Do those actually exist?
Excellent question. So they go to the historic society or some sort of library.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and they have microfilm.
yeah,
Yeah, they do
I
exist.
mean,
I've seen it before, but
you
it.
have?
Yeah,
Okay, because
I've been to a very old library, and they had microfilm, and they have it in a little canister, and they
is
have
it one? Go ahead.
oh yeah. So for those who may not know this, because everything is turning digital, but for decades, um, people used to carry printed. They would have copies of printed stuff. Well, paper disintegrates over time, so in the mid 20th century, they decided that they would take pictures of everything and then store those. They wouldn't print the pictures; they would keep it on the film, and they would keep it on microfilm, so it's even smaller than normal film. And then they would just keep reels and reels of that. And film actually lasts pretty well, I think. I mean, you kind of have to store it in the right conditions. I'm
Yeah,
not a huge expert on that, but yeah,
probably compared to paper.
yeah, compared to paper. So the idea is you take a photograph of a newspaper, and then you've got the microfilm, and now you have the record of what it was. And these photographs were detailed enough that you could actually read a newspaper, and that way they can capture it. And so you could go into a library. Um, Most libraries that people have don't have microfilm, and they don't have the microfilm machines anymore. But in the past, and you can still find a few places that have this, you can go in the past, you could go in and say, I need to see this newspaper from 100 years ago on this date. And they would find the microfilm, and they'd put it into their machine, and it would project light through the microfilm onto a giant screen. Nothing computerized, but it looks like you're sitting there on a desktop computer scanning
Yeah,
through things. Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, this film does a good job of building the mystery because he knows there's something going on because of the pounding.
Mm-hmm.
Then the window breaks, so he finds the boarded up room to figure out where the window was broken. Inside the room, he finds a journal, a child's journal with initials on it that has a date on it. So using that he has his friend at the historical society kind of look up the dates. From the dates, they go to the newspaper to find that there is a child died, and then from that they keep going
But
and
it's a
going.
different child.
Yeah,
It's the daughter.
yeah, because from that they think it's the daughter. So that's when he goes to the college where he gets the medium, and it's during the seance that they find out that it's not the daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Thought the seance scene was pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's some real aspects of it in that there are seance people that actually try to draw that whole thing where she draws
Yeah, the
circles, and she's trying to somehow draw something recognizable
well,
on it.
I actually a little bit. I I must have looked this up. Must have looked up this at some point before. But what she was doing is called automatic writing or spirit writing. The
Okay. How do
idea behind it is that you kind of put yourself, is that the medium puts themselves into a trance,
mm-hmm.
and then the ghost is the one that sort of writes for them. Apparently, and I just did a little research on this last night. It's a pretty historical thing. It goes as far back as the 1200s in China and the 1500s in England.
Okay.
I don't know what the big metal cone thing was supposed to be. That like
Yeah.
happens in the next scene.
Right.
I tried to do a little bit of research on it because I'm I'm kind of tangentially interested in like this paranormal stuff and
Sure.
paranormal stuff anyway. So I'm always a little curious about. I think it might have supposed to been a spirit trumpet, but those are supposed to be more used for like like more of a more of a horn and a gramophone that sort of amplifies sound. So I don't think a spirit trumpet is supposed to like just sit on the table and rock around or whatever happens in the movie.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know much about it either. I almost think like this is my fan theory, and this is not historical at all, but I almost think like the strategy would be that ghosts seem to have limited capabilities. What their capabilities are completely unknown. But it seems like the cone is there to kind of help them use their capabilities to interface with them, because the ghost can't really do much, but somehow it can make this cone vibrate, and that's part of it.
Yeah, but how is the cone supposed to like help the ghost answer the yes or no questions the medium was asking them by just sitting there rocking around, right? I mean,
Yeah, like what is it?
the
I don't know.
it's like the cone was just kind of there to lead up to the glass being flung across the scene,
It's just there to
which
build
is
tension.
yeah,
Well,
which totally works because I feel like glass being the glass being flung across the room and breaking is like it's like the first real jump scare in the movie, and it got me.
yeah.
and then and then from there, the guy he he listens to a recording of the seance because he was recording it for his own purposes, and that's when he hears the voice of the ghost, and the voice of the ghost like says says his name and gives him a few other clues, which
Hmm.
leads on to him going to the Hall Records to find the place the kid mentioned, or he
Yeah.
wrote something down, I forget.
And they have a town atlas that they've
Yeah.
created. And I just want to say, I think all that stuff is cool. I love the idea of creating an atlas for a town every once in a while just to keep track of records. And I'm sure there's a lot of old towns that have records like that. They have they have people that they hire to keep track of these records, and it's all cool stuff. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like all that.
I guess maybe in our area, or just not the old enough area for us to really have anything like that, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, it's just fun. I love record keeping. I'm just a nerd for that kind of stuff, and so seeing that in the movie was like, oh, this is fun. They have all the atlases in a big, like opened, and they have them displayed in a big circle. So they just like walk around the circle and they say, look, it was here, and now this is how it's changed. We don't know everything that happened in between, but we can see there's a well here and there's no well in the next time they drew an atlas. So
Yeah, but there's a house built there, so they go to talk to the lady in the house, and the lady's like, I would think you guys are totally crazy if it wasn't for the fact that my daughter just like except
mhm.
my daughter said that on the night you guys had your seance, she like woke up screaming because she had a nightmare about a little boy like trying to claw his way out of a well or something.
Yeah.
It's just a very good build up. It's a it's not a lot of information coming at a time. It's a clue logically leading to a clue, logically leading to another clue.
Yeah.
Which sounds simple, but I guess ain't.
It ain't. It's true. It ain't. It takes a lot of effort and takes a lot of thinking to organize all this stuff into a script. Yeah, and they did a good job putting this one together. You have to give them credit for that.
Yeah, so
Um,
now we did the thing we said we were not going to do again, which was do a play by play of the movie. So
well, we get drawn into it. There's a lot of scenes in here that are fun. Um, I think that what was the thing that scared you the most in this movie?
like I think maybe the best scare, like the one that makes you go, "Oh crap," is as dumb as it sounds. It's the so there's a scene where he's in the house by himself and he has kept a little red ball that his daughter had because he doesn't know it's a keepsake from his daughter. So he's sitting there in the room and he's in his house alone at night, and the ball kind of bounces by itself down the stairs, and at this point he thinks there's something going on, and but he's not really Is this before? I can't remember if it's before or after the window breaks. Do you remember?
This is before the window breaks.
Is it before the window breaks?
Yeah.
I think it might be. Oh, anyway. But anyway, long story short, he goes he he goes and he like throws the ball into like a he throws it off a bridge like into a body of water, and you can tell it's kind of hard for him because it's a keepsake from his daughter, so kind of he kind of doesn't really want to let go of it, but it's also playing a part in the spookiness going on. So he gets home, and then the ball just bounces down the stairs, and it's wet, and it sounds really dumb, but it is such a good scene.
It is a good scene, and it's a great idea of it too.
How about you? What was your favorite scare of the movie?
The same one you picked.
The ball. The
The
ball's
definitely
good.
the ball. And just like when that happens, he backs up to the like it bounces, and just the look on his face. The actor does so well, just how he backs up and looks at it. Although I think the best moment of the best acting of all in this whole movie is the lady from the historic society, Claire.
hmm
I think that when just very upset, and she's really like her emotions, she's really upset about what's going on. She's um and she walks down the hallway, and she just stops and stares up the stairs, and she's just like petrified with fear.
Is this like at the end when she goes in the house thinking that he's home but he's not?
This is before that.
Before that.
This is before that. This is yeah, so this is right after the séance, and so they know that something's happening. Um but she's really emotionally distraught over the idea of this tragedy happening. And
Yeah,
when
that's
it's like the moment she leaves the room, she looks up the stairs, and the audience doesn't see what's going on. All they know is they see
yeah, 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 yeah.
her
I think
staring petrified.
I know what you're talking about now. I
Yeah,
know what you're talking about now.
yeah. I think that was really good acting. Really good acting.
You're talking about a scene. You're talking about a scene where she kind of walks out of the room. She just looks up the stairs, like stops, and the guy's just like, "What's wrong?" He looks up, and there's the wheelchair at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, somehow the wheelchair is now on the top of the stairs.
Yeah, that. Oh,
You know,
it's such
here's
a
the
good
thing.
movie. It's so freaking heavy.
The one thing The one thing I thought about though is like, but the wheelchair later on went back into the room. Does that mean that John Russell at some point decided to walk up and pick up that rocking chair, or that, not the rocking chair, pick up the wheelchair and carry it up to that room and put it
Well,
back? Because honestly, I
well,
would be terrified to even do something like that.
well. Are you just gonna like leave the wheelchair at the top of the stairs,
I don't
or
know.
should go put it back?
Yeah, of course. You say that, but I would not want to put it back.
I'm not saying I would want to put it back, but I'm also not gonna leave that thing just out in the open.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting thought.
Okay.
So, uh, is there anything else? Anything else you want to mention?
So I don't know. Guess we'll kind of on this. Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
we kind of touched on the house. They just kind of walk up to. Was like, hey, we want to dig up your floor. How how
Uh,
much convincing would it take for you to have someone kind of walk up to your house and want to do that to your house for them to do it?
no amount of convincing would be enough. None. Be like, no way. I guess, yeah. I would not let anybody tear
Yeah,
up the
but
house.
I suppose then again, where we live, if they want to get something out under the house, they'd have to like dig through concrete.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Like I mentioned before, I'm just not a homeowner, so I
Hey, it was
have
the
to. I
1980s. People were different back then. Very trusting. Be like,
I have
oh, okay, a stranger wants to dig up my floor. Like,
yeah. So I do want to kind of do want to touch on the ending again. Now we talked about the wheelchair scene, but sort of more what happens with Carmichael, Sander Carmichael. I it's like I like the idea of him like going into the house to face his past, but I also think it would have worked better if he was like actually at the house instead of like psychically projecting or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like the ending was just kind of thrown together.
Yeah,
The thing about the ending is it's like the ghost wants something, but John Russell doesn't really know what the ghost wants, but he's trying to do something to make the history of the ghost be at peace or something. I think that's the idea, is that ghosts are like, according to the lore, ghosts are like people who have disturbing um, experiences. And so they're just not at peace from their experiences in life and in death. And so because of that, they go about and they're just troubled. They're troubled in some way. And so the idea is that you have to do something meaningful to put them at peace again. So I
yeah,
think John Russell is trying to do something in order to, I guess, put this ghost at rest. And finding his body is one thing, but
yeah.
also,
For sorry, just
yeah,
gonna
talking to Mr. Carmichael, whoever he is.
yeah. So hang on, I'm gonna
Yeah, go
interject
ahead.
some
Yeah, go ahead.
context here for anyone who hasn't watched the movie. So the mystery is that so it turns out that the people who used to own the house that John Russell moves into, the Carmichaels, they so the idea is that the the older Carmichael, it turns out that after his wife dies, he so Carmichael married into a rich family, but after the wife dies, the estate gets passed to her son, or I guess to their son. But if the but Carmichael is the caretaker. But if the son dies before he turns 21, the estate goes to charity. But Carmichael, the son Carmichael, was a sickly child. So what happens is that the older Carmichael, he kills his son. He drowns him in the bathtub,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes to an orphanage and adopts a child from there. Then he takes the child to Europe for I think over a decade under the pretext of having his son treated for his illness. And then once the once he comes back, as far as anyone knows, the orphan is the original son. That's where the name of the movie comes from, the Changeling. The
Yeah.
son
I've
was changed out.
hmm
So the ghost in the house is the original son that was murdered. And through these clues, it leads John Russell to sort of confront the senator, who at this point is an old man, about I guess the sins of the father and whether or not the senator knew what happened or not.
I think I would theorize that the senator probably knew something was up because he would have been adopted as a young kid. He would have known a lot of things, but it's almost like his father probably convinced him so much to play this role that he
Well,
probably
yeah,
almost a little bit of Stockholm syndrome of some kind. He like bought into the idea so much that he became um, Joseph Carmichael.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie kind of sends mixed signals in that regard
Yeah.
because I'd like the end. Uh, John Russell finds the I'm not is it a baptism token,
I don't
something like
know.
that?
It's I don't know.
That he finds a necklace that that belonged to the original child, and he uses that to confront the senator. But the senator has his own copy of it. But they kind of, after that confrontation, they kind of cut back to the senator, and it seems like he's he's looking at both of them at the same time, like he's trying to reconcile it. So going off that, it seems like he doesn't know. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, there's the scene earlier in the movie where he gets a call from the other lady in the historical society saying that they're digging through the record. So it's like, why? So with that, it kind of implies that he does know, or at least implies that he knows that his dad had some shady dealings. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the
I
movie's not really clear on whether the sender actually knows or not, I think.
yeah. I think that he has to know something. He has to
He
have
has to know,
some. Yeah.
he has to know something, but maybe not the whole story.
Yes,
Like,
definitely. There's parts of it that he didn't know happened. But it's definitely something to where he will cover up the past. 'Cause I think he knows that he was somehow a changeling or replacement, but he doesn't know all the details, and he doesn't really want to know.
well, again, at this point, he's a very old man because the show was set in like the early like 19 late 70s, and the original child was killed in 1906, 1909. So he's at very least in his late 70s.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I said, the ending just felt kind of rushed because the sander just kind of, as the house just kind of spontaneously burns down because the ghost is angry, the sander just kind of appears and goes up to the room, which, like I said, I like that in theory, but the execution of how they got around to it doesn't really work. And then like and then John and Claire just kind of drive up to the senator's house after just so they can see the senator's body being carried away in an ambulance. Like, doesn't make a lot of sense. They just can just drive up to the senator's house and pose dramatically on his porch.
I agree. The ending didn't work as well for me
Yeah,
either. It's the stuff that builds up to the ending, which is much better, more well
yeah,
done.
but like I said, I feel like the endings in horror is often hard to get
Yeah.
right.
I almost think like from my what I would guess is that the ghost wanted something from John Russell, but the ghost didn't know what it was that it wanted. Which I think is normal sometimes, because even people are like that. Sometimes we want something, but we just don't know what it is. And I think the ghost was in that situation where it was under this severe psychological stress, but it didn't know what the answer was, but it felt it was something to do with making a restitution. And so when John Russell tries to make some sort of restitution for the ghost, some sort of justice that it brings in because of this, it's like it still was unhappy. And it's still unhappy at John Russell because it didn't give him what he wanted. And so the ghost kind of goes a little bit more crazy towards the end. That's what I would interpret.
Yeah, and yeah, that makes sense of how the movie ends because it also does the cliche horror movie ending of, oh, it's not really over because like the very last scene is like the house is burned down, but like shows the music box and the music box opens by itself and starts playing. So it's like, oh, it's not really over. So
Yeah.
it's like 99, like 95% of the movie is great. That the ending is a little disappointing, but I think that's
And it doesn't make a
sort
lot of
of,
sense, too.
yeah.
You can kind of force yourself to think it makes sense, but really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but to be entirely fair, it doesn't take away from the fact the rest of the movie is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Hmm. Yeah, I think through watching Mr. Boogedy and this movie, at the beginning, I thought, yeah, I'd live in a scary house. If it's a nice house, why not? Then after the change thing, I'm like, no, no, it's time to move.
So, Angry Pilgrim that sold his soul, that's okay.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
the ghost of murdered child is less okay. Oh, that is so dark. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Do we have anything else to say, or are we going to end it on that?
Let's end it on a dark,
Okay.
dismal note. Actually,
Okay.
let's
If
let's
it's
brighten it up. Let's talk
right,
about the next thing that we are going to talk about.
okay. What is the next thing we're going to talk about, Jeff?
Well, it's weird because in the way we recorded things, it's something we've already talked about. But what people will likely have on the next grand posting of the Wandering Tangent podcast is something. What's it going to be? I don't even know the order. I don't know. I don't know.
That's why I asked you.
This is why I don't make movies, because they would be a build up to like nothing. I'd have this huge build up, and then suddenly, I don't know.
And then the house burns down.
We don't have an ending. Just make the house burn down.
And then the house burns down, and I don't know, the music box opens, and then the wheelchair chases someone. I don't know.
Yeah. A fiery, rampaging wheelchair goes around the town and frightens all the kids. And they decided, oh, well, it's a scary thing, but we'll take it trick-or-treating with us. So that's what it is. People, like, you hear a knock on the door and you open it up and it's just a wheelchair.
Is the wheelchair on fire?
Is the wheelchair on fire? Yeah, it's on fire, too. That would be a good prank. Like, I'm not advocating to anyone do this, but like, get some cobwebs, get an old antique wheelchair, go knock on the door on Halloween, and just drop the wheelchair and run away.
Okay.
As long as I'm telling people, don't actually do that, but it would, in theory, be a funny prank.
Well, as long as it's on the wheelchair on fire, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, the fire is probably not necessary.
No.
Just the empty wheelchair, and to have it covered with cobwebs. Anyone who knows the movie well, like if they were a huge fan of the movie, just put that in front of their door.
Okay.
It would take a lot of effort to find the right kind of wheelchair.
I'll say it's probably anyway. So what
kind of other dark thoughts could we come up with?
I don't know. Oh no! The last time we tried, last time me and you tried to pull a prank that involved knocking on someone's door. The person who I think we did, the mutual friend, we were gonna knock on his door and blast him with Nerf guns, but he knew something was up, so he wouldn't come to the door.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember this at all, but that certainly sounds like he won.
Well, that's because it kind of fell flat, so it wasn't very memorable.
We did get a good scare once. We were at a group with a huge crowd, mostly girls. Yeah, we managed. Yeah, and we had a friend. He was sitting on a chair, and they were watching. What was the movie? I think it's What Lies
Beneath.
What Lies Beneath, which is a lot like The Changeling. It's the same. It's very similar like that, in that it tries to draw you in. Only this movie is more recent, and they really put a lot of effort into their build up and jump scares. So yeah, we decided to scare this person, and we had no real good ideas on how to do it. So we decided to walk out in the backyard and to like tap on the window just to try and do something.
Well, I think the idea was that, I could remember, I think the original plan was that you were gonna like get on my shoulders and we were gonna like plaster you like up against the window or something. But
was that your idea? I don't remember.
I think that was the original idea, but then like there was like a window well or something right there.
It was logistically not possible.
It was logistically not possible. So instead I just kind of reached up and slapped on the window, and apparently we accidentally had very good timing.
Yeah, and then we walk in and like everyone is just bursting up laughing. And we're like, what is it? Apparently we hit the window just at the most perfect moment in the movie, and our friend had like jumped up and fell out of his chair just when that happened. Yeah. Anyway. Yes.
On the off chance this friend is watching this, because I don't think I haven't seen him in time immemorial, but
I'm sure he won't.
On the off chance you listen to this, sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not funny. Totally worth it. Anyway, so I guess we'll figure out what's getting posted next time.
Yeah, something.
It's
It'll be
it's
something.
it's either going to be a short episode or one of our longer episodes, depends on what we decide to do. So find out next time. Happy Halloween, everybody.
So long. Goodbye.
I
We
was,
stop this bad.
I was,
Stop this madness.
this was. I was waiting for you to say something else, but I guess not. Okay, so that was. So this was the Wandering Tangent podcast. I'm BJ. With me was Jeff, and we'll see you next time.